Welcome to The Healer's Journey. I'm Pauline Romao, founder of Body Holistic Hub and your host. This podcast takes you into the world of holistic healing through intimate conversations with dedicated practitioners. Today I'm sitting down with Anthia, a naturopath who's been practicing for over 30 years. And this isn't your typical wellness chat. We get into how our nervous system might actually be the missing piece when it comes to chronic health issues. She opens up about losing the business she'd spent years building, what that taught her about stress and burnout, and why she now believes healing isn't just individual, it's collective. Anthia also talks about this concept she calls first aid, basically why you need to create some breathing room before you can do the deeper healing work. We also dive into Polyvagal theory, which sounds complicated but is really just about understanding if you're stuck in fight or flight mode or if you're actually able to rest and digest. She also makes a really compelling and interesting case for why bitter and sour foods might be one of the most overlooked tools for nervous system regulation. We cover a lot more ground too, but I don't want to give it all away. So if you've ever felt like you're ticking all the boxes, like eating well or exercising, but you're still exhausted, this conversation might completely change how you think about health. All right, let's get on to it. Hi, Anthia, and thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on the podcast because you're a naturopath with so much experience that I'm really looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into a few topics with you. Let's just start with naturopathy itself. It's a word and a practice that I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, but perhaps they all have a slightly different understanding of what it actually involves. So I'd love if you could describe what you do as a naturopath so that everyone can be on the same page.
Thank you. I think it's a good place to start too. So when I think of myself as a naturopath, I think of myself as a holistic health practitioner. We're looking at the person as a whole: mind, body, spirit, soul, environment. We're drawing on very traditional wisdom and modern science. We're using different modalities or therapies. So it could be nutrition, lifestyle, it could be homeopathy, herbal medicine, so many different things. And I think different, modalities suit different practitioners. I love the whole world of herbal medicine and food as medicine. So that I think that's an area that I adore and love so much. Though sometimes people think, gosh, you sound like a counselor or a therapist, Anthia, as well. And it's because I can't separate the mind from the body and the spirit and the soul. And I think, the other piece of it is we're always searching for the underlying causes and contributing factors as to why people feel the way they feel, why they express the symptoms that they express, and showing them the path forward to meeting all those parts of themselves that need tending to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to understand what originally drew you to naturopathy. How did you hear about it in the first place?
My parents had a book on their bookshelf called How to Get Well by a naturopathic physician called Paavo Ariola. And the book was published in 1971. And I was about 12 years of age. And when I discovered it, I just felt completely attuned to it. It's really hard to think back. I just remember reading it thinking, eyes wide open, this is very exciting. It showed how to heal with foods and medicine and lifestyle, A to Z of different symptoms. So I was, as a little 12-year-old, you're dry brushing and you're growing herbs and you're putting things on your face and making poultices and wrapping yourself in bandages soaked in chamomile. And he talked about fermented foods and drinks and soaking and all sorts of things that is a very popular in this last decade. I don't know, it was just something just clicked in. It's as if it was something really ancestral that's like, this is what you're going to be doing.
Wow, that's amazing that you knew that early. And I mean, you've been practicing for over 30 years now?
Yeah.
That's incredible. And, how has naturopathy evolved and how have you evolved with it throughout those 30 years?
I think That's such a really good question. How have I evolved with it? Because when I first started out, I was so young. I graduated in 1994. So I was only in my early 20s. And so when I came out, I was working for my mentor, and I would just see leftover clients that she couldn't fit in or see. I didn't have a particular area of interest or focus in those days. Just being the naturopath was already alternative and special enough. And how I've evolved with it, I think, is the more I applied naturopathy to myself and the more I did work on myself and getting to know me as a human in context of what life is and health and healing, is how it evolved for me. So the more work I did on myself, the more the practice grew and adapted and kind of then started to specialize in areas that I was really interested in.
Hmm.
Really, at the time, we were very fringe dwelling, very alternative. It wasn't considered complementary. It was almost like that's what the witches did on the edge of the forest. It
Yeah,
just now it's changed. The landscape has changed, and consumers want ancient wisdom and a softer approach, but effective approach, and something that's considering the whole.
absolutely. And now naturopathy walks alongside conventional medicine. It is really complementary. And I- I'd love to know from your perspective, do you often work with people that are seeing their doctors and specialists? Do you work closely with their doctors? Or how do you navigate that relationship? Because there are wonderful integrative GPs that understand, but also we hear of uh, the challenge that people sometimes face when they tell their doctor that they're also seeing a naturopath. Like,
I think as a young naturopath, I was very fortunate and was working in different medical centers with doctors who are very interested in holistic health and healing. I think integrative doctors are very different to naturopaths in that they're not studying herbal medicine the way we do, or
mhm,
nutrition or supplements for that fact, but they have an interest in underlying causes and contributing factors, which is very, very important. I've worked alongside all sorts of practitioners, doctors. It depends. So usually when a patient comes and sees me, I want them to not feel like they have to hide this part of their choice of holistic healing or something that will complement what they're currently doing. I have patients who come and see me for complementary support, but there are patients who will come and see for a complete alternative point of view as well. The
mhm,
reason I like them to embrace their practitioners is because it keeps them centered, as in patient centered support, rather than it's practitioner versus practitioner, in that I write letters to the doctor saying, this, your patient has come to see me for the following reasons. Because I think fragmentation and reductionism of conditions and fragmentation of modalities and therapies and care is such a barrier to healing for patients. It's an awful thing.
absolutely. And I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, we want the best outcome for the patient. And it often happens when different practitioners can work together and use their strengths to, um, help their patient. And do you have maybe an example where you've seen naturopathic and, conventional approaches work really, really well together and really, complement each other?
I will choose a very modern current experience. That most of my patients who are trying to lose weight now on the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, the medication to suppress their appetites. And with that, patients will come and say to me, I've heard there's lots of side effects. I know I need to be really mindful of my diet. Is there anything else that I need to do to support my journey in weight loss? And with that, we're making sure they're getting adequate protein, they're getting the right whole food nutrition because their appetite minimizes, and perhaps maybe um, connection or their relationship with food. So food doesn't become this very narrow, just got to get enough proteins, in that we're still reminding them, but what is food and
Hmm.
what is whole foods? and eating seasonally and locally and supporting the digestive process. So I think that's a nice, good modern example. I mean, obviously, you can apply that to so many different medical conditions. I think often what happens when people see naturopath is they've only got thus far with their doctor in managing symptoms, and now they want to address the underlying causes and contributing factors.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, often it's more about dealing with the symptoms and trying to find a way to alleviate those. But if you want to understand how you got sick in the first place, or as you
Yeah,
mentioned, what's contributing to it, you need to go a little bit deeper into
yeah,
that. And naturopath is very well placed.
yeah.
If we go back to, a bit of your personal journey in business, I know you went through quite a significant challenge a few years ago where you lost the business that you had built over many, many years. Can you tell us, about, what happened and what you learned about yourself through that experience?
The business we're talking about is not just my clinic. Is I started a business which was a tea company, which I needed capital and I needed know-how at the time because the company just grew so big. So I was running my naturopathic clinic. I had started this tea company and it just took off as this premium organic tea company, and it was loved by cafes and restaurants and consumers. When I brought an investor at the time, I was kind of in this haze of overwhelm, complete saturation, working a lot. I was still looking after myself and self-caring because I think it was so part of me to always do that. But I found business in the modern sense difficult in that it was hard. It was especially for someone like me who doesn't want to cut corners, who's not going to refine the product offering, who wants to keep things as holistic and whole. But there's only a certain point that you can grow a business like that. In hindsight, I should have made the business smaller, which is essentially what I've done now, and not been on the treadmill of growth of more, 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 bigger, bigger, bigger. And as a consequence, I'm bringing on a business partner in that really cycle of stress where I could not see whether I was coming or going. I made really bad decisions. And in a sense, I gave away too much of my company. The manufacturing company was moved to another state and it went into a very terrible space and place where I eventually lost the business to this business partner. And that's when I looked at stress and looked at my identity to business and looked at something that I had built, and I'd created something so beautiful for the public, my customers and my patients. And where did I land with that? And I think it really did bring me to my knees because I was in a place where I found my other clients in, my other patients in, which is consumed by stress, ignoring instincts and intuition, ignoring all the red flags, and being so overwhelmed that you don't have clarity.
Hmm.
And so, in that journey, I thought, well, I'm not going to do that again. I always say no one can really steal your light, gifts, or your purpose. So, I was able to pick myself up and continue to consult, but reimagined a different style of business that didn't consume me or didn't paralyze me. But on that journey, I think I did a deep dive into the holistic mind and body nervous system. And at that time in 2020, there was a lot of exciting things coming out about the nervous system. And so then I went down on that path.
And I know that you discovered some approaches that became really key for you, like the polyvagal theories and path warps. And, for those that might not have heard those terms before, could you explain, and starting with polyvagal theory, what
Yeah.
it is and why it was such a game changer for you personally?
Yeah. This is work that's been around for a long time as well. But for me, in 2020, when I went through such significant stress and I thought, how did I find myself here in the first place? This is my world. I'm into well-being and wellness and naturopathy and, the cool, very ancient traditional wisdoms of that. And I thought I need to do some work with my therapist. And And in a sense, I'd always been doing the work, but it wasn't until I realized the position of my nervous system for such a long time, which is the fight-flight response. Dr. Stephen Porges basically created the framework, the groundbreaking framework for polyvagal, which is understanding at any given moment, where are you within your nervous system? Are you in fight flight, the sympathetic part of your nervous system? Are you in the rest and digest state, which is the counterbalance to fight or flight, also called social engagement? Social engagement, rest and digest, they're the part of your nervous system where you feel really safe and comfortable, and there's clarity and there's perspective and there's curiosity. There's space to breathe. I wasn't in that space when I was running my business. Business became quite big and heavy for me. I was in a constant state of fight and freeze. And that's the other state that he talks a lot about, is when we dissociate. It's the ultimate protective emergency part of the nervous system, when we dissociate, compartmentalize, distance ourselves from, almost flatten down from a very hyper vigilant fight flight to a really flat, quiet state. And when I understood how I was running myself day to day, it's no wonder I found myself making very poor decisions. And then I recognized that within my patients, and I thought, hold on a second here, let's put the lens of the nervous system in front of every single patient and choice and symptom and disease. And let's look at how people are operating.
And you say you can see that in your client and in yourself. What are the signs? How can someone detect if they are in one state or the other?
I think as practitioners, we can sense it and we can see it and we can feel it when a patient is suffering from the physiological expression of fight flight, increased heart rate, lots of adrenaline, high blood pressure, kind of darting around, feeling, they're kind of tired. So it's just in the language and what they say, and I'm very attuned to it. And my job as a practitioner is to offer them my regulated nervous system so they can attune to that and also experience something different. And in a freeze response, it's like a patient's not even there. They're just kind of very disconnected, almost glazed. They're present, they've chosen, they're spending good money to see me, but they're somewhere else making lists in their head, and they've completely gone into the ultimate protective mode. So I think, oh, something's cooking here, something's going on here. And I started to think, well, then how are we helping our patients heal if they're in a fight-flight response or a dissociated freeze response? How are we going to do the deeper work of chronic gut issues? How are we going to do that deeper work? We need to remind them of regulation. They're in fight and flight and they think that's the only mode that they are to be in. So most patients will say to me, oh, yes, I relax, Anthia. That's just dissociation. Dissociation via social media scrolling, Netflix binge watching. People are very good at dissociating, going into freeze response, drinking, recreational drugs, emotional eating, to kind of push it all down. So I think it's the questions we ask, it's the sense that we get, it's the physiological expressions. So there are very obvious physical manifestations of each part of their nervous system.
Okay. And is that related to pathworks or is that different?
I think that's really interesting intersection there, because what is pathwork? For many who don't know what that is, Dr. Richard Schwartz, he developed something called the internal family systems, and that we are made of multiple parts in our family within ourselves. And I think the most famous part that everyone seems to know about is the critic that's constantly saying, don't do that, do this, stop doing that, people are going to think this, whatever it might be. But there are more than one part or more than just the critic. And there are different parts of ourselves that have evolved since childhood, and maybe some we've inherited or adopted along the way, that help us cope with different types of stresses. So there are parts who are acting in a fight flight, there are parts who know how to dissociate and freeze. And so when I learnt about those parts within myself that were acting in different ways, I could start to untangle. And rather than say, I am so overwhelmed or I'm so stressed, it's a part of me feels overwhelmed. And another part of me seems to be clear and focused over here. And there's this other part of me that is like, done. I'm running away from this. And I think that work that I was doing with my therapist, and I think it's really important work that no matter the modality or what practitioner you are, that you are mindful of this. I think the untangling gets to the core of much of what is going on for patients.
Okay. And I know, you talk about starting when you see someone for the first time with what you call first aid, which is about creating capacity before diving into deeper healing work. And when I hear you talk about parts work and, nervous system, it's not really related to that, which is on making sure the person is ready to go deeper. Can you talk me through what that means and
Yeah,
what does creating capacity look like for you?
yeah. I realized that, yes, we like diving deep and addressing the underlying causes and contributing factors. But if people come to us sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, so overwhelmed, no time to eat well, no time to do anything, they're saying this to us. For us to then add in to an already busy schedule, add in all these different things that we would like them to do, get up early and go to the gym, the list of things that we want them to do. Sure, we possibly could get results, but if they don't have any energy or focus or concentration or clarity, if they just don't have the reserves or capacity, it's just pointless. So I quickly try and work out what would be the one or two things that would make a difference in their energy levels or to provide them some clarity. A lot of people come to see me and they're so dehydrated, and it feels so obvious to say start drinking water because it's probably going to create some clarity in your head and maybe your joints won't feel so creaky and you won't feel so dry. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it's okay, you're dehydrated and you're feeling really stressed. I might recommend some magnesium glycinate, and you're iron deficient because I've seen your blood test results, some iron, and maybe some theanine and glycine or GABA that you take at night for a really good night's sleep. Sometimes it's just very much the first aid. And we're not saying that's it. We're just creating some space. Again, now let's go deeper because you've got chronic ongoing Crohn's disease or arthritis or
Mhm.
something else. Now we're going to work through that. It's just, and it makes common sense, doesn't it?
No, for sure.
What I call first aid.
Because we used to go see a doctor and it's just about trying to find a solution to exactly what you're dealing with at the moment. We don't tend to do exactly what you've mentioned. Let's go back to the basics. What's happening for you and how can we put you into a good enough state so that we can then look at the other more persistent symptoms
Yeah.
that you're working with a lot of chronic and persistent symptoms. What do you see as often the real underlying causes of those type of issues?
I think people are out of sync with their own rhythms and the rhythms of life. So they're very disconnected to their circadian rhythms, their 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. They're disconnected to a monthly rhythm for women particularly. They're disconnected from a seasonal rhythm. They're, they're just not attuned or aligned. They've almost working or living in a silo separate from a context and environment of the different food on offer, the different temperature of food that we should be eating when it's winter. We're not meant to be having a cold smoothie in the middle of winter. So I think it's that. I think people are overwhelmed and saturated in information, technology, confusion, just an overload. So there isn't space. So I think just saturation, a disconnect or attunement to the natural rhythms of life. I think there is a lack of education. Some people actually have no idea what to do. Just simple things like how their digestive system works, that you need to chew your food until liquid. Why? Because that helps you further digest and it increases digestive juices, which further helps you digest and break down your food. So I think a lack of education is that piece. I think there are so many different barriers to healing. I think is this not being able to get good health care. People can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
B, they can't access it. C, they can only do a certain amount and then anything long standing kind of is in the background because I can only just cope with just managing these symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just so many, and that's why I'm writing a book on this because it isn't just eat better or exercise, because we have clients who eat the best food and do all the exercise and they're still exhausted and they still have symptoms. And
And so
sometimes it's really simple. They're not getting enough sleep because they're on their phones. It could be that simple.
that's really interesting. I think what you said, it's like almost we lost touch with a certain knowledge that the older generation still had access to. Why do you think that's the case? Because it feels like we've got so much information available nowadays, but actually so little knowledge of it.
Well, I think it's because people don't have time to go deeper, really. Everyone's just skimming the surface. Everything is bite-sized information. No one has time to linger longer and go really deep and really feel in. And that's what it is. If everyone's just going from A to B to C to D, it's like this mania. It's just this treadmill of expansion and growth and propelling ourselves forward and doing more, um, not less. And, the AI and the technology over time, like, when the vacuum cleaner came out, sure, it meant that we weren't maybe sweeping, but it just meant we were just vacuuming more, where there was just more dirt that was being created to vacuum more. It's like with the AI, it's like it makes life easier, but it seems to make life easier, but to do more because it creates capacity for us to do more. It's not like it's made this piece easier, now I can rest. It's like rest isn't part of the dialogue. People feel guilty to just rest. People don't have time to linger and go deeper is one of the biggest things. It's just there's no depth.
Okay. And if we wanted to, get practical, for a moment and going back to nervous system health, for someone who's listening and who is hearing everything that you're, sharing, and is there one simple practice that they could begin with today? It's not going to be the solution to everything, but one step um, towards, calming their nervous system and looking after themselves better.
Yeah, I think it's look at all the things that you do within a day and how much of what you do in a day um, is conducive to looking after your health and self-care. Because I see so many clients, it's like, oh, that's the last thing I will do is eat and drink, and I've got no time to go to the bathroom. I've just got to get work done. So
Mm.
is really look at what it is that you do. Take a breath and look at how you run your day. How do you feel? Look at all the things that you're doing. How much do you dedicate to your re-nourishment on every single level? Are you constantly just on that treadmill? So I think it's first become aware. Now, you could ask me that question in an hour and I might answer it differently because it might just be chew your food until liquid,
Mm-hmm.
or go for a 15-minute walk every time after you've eaten your 3 main meals so you can support digestion. It changes. It's a really hard one. It's just whatever I'm thinking of at the moment because there are so many different kind of things that
Of course.
could create some space.
And you're also quite passionate about bitter and sour type foods. What's special about this taste and how do they support healing in your view?
Well, I've had a long love affair, I think, with bitters, being a herbalist, because digestive bitters is what we use to take before meals. And, they follow from the tradition of aperitifs and digestives. So you take them after a meal. But bitters taken before a meal, whether it's bitter herbs in a tincture form or bitter lettuces like radicchio or endive or rocket stimulate digestive juices. So the minute we taste bitter on our tongue, you start salivating. The same with sour and tart, like citrus, lemon zest, things like this. But our palate is designed, it feels like now, just for sweet and savory, salty, and we've forgotten bitter, tart, sour. But the reason why I love this so much is that if rest and digest is the counterbalance to fight flight, could we take bitters, and those bitter herbs also happen to be carminatives or nervines that support the nervous system, could we create that pause before we eat that'll support digestion, and it becomes the counterbalance to fight flight? So the idea of those kind of ancient traditions of bitters before meals, for me, go much deeper in that we're not just supporting digestion, we're actually regulating the nervous system. And also, when we have bitters and sour tart, we're creating diversity in the different foods that we're eating, which people lack. Because I see it every day when we do comprehensive stool analysis testing, we see people's gut microbiomes really low in beneficial bacteria. There's not enough diversity in the foods that they're eating, and perhaps it's just stress, but I think it's a combination of lots of different things. And again, it's untraining, and it's a re-remembering or an unlearning, whatever words you want to use, of what we've evolved to eat, which is not packaged, processed, savory, sweet, and salty foods. It's not just about that. So for me, exercising the taste sense, because we sense safety, that when we exercise the taste through broadening our taste buds, where we can use that to regulate the nervous system, because we're awakening a part of our nervous system. We're sensing safety. We're sensing, is this good for us? How does this make us feel? Does it make my digestive system work better? But everything feels blunted by the foods that we're eating, even the noise that we hear, even the things that we see. Everything feels really flat and blunt and homogeneous and monotonous.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And going back, I remember my grandparents, they always had that before any meal. And then now we just go straight into the main and forget about all of that, which is, yeah,
Mm.
interesting. I know there is another, really interesting perspective that, you have around healing, which is the fact that healing isn't just individual, that it's collective. And when I read that about you, I thought that was quite fascinating, because we tend to always hear that we have to take responsibility for our own health, but you're taking a slightly different approach to that. Can you tell me what do you mean by this?
Yes, thank you for bringing this up, because I wholeheartedly have real clarity around this, that healing is not just individual, it is also collective. It's both. And it's because the choices I make impact you and you and you and you, everyone. And I'm going to give some really simple examples here. If I invest and choose organic, regenerative food, then it doesn't just nourish me, it supports the health of soil and the farmer and the bees and the future climate. When I'm aware of my nervous system, I might be less reactive, and maybe I can model a regulated nervous system and space for others to co-regulate with me. And if I learn to rest and refuse the culture of burnout, then I can model that to my patients. I use less toxic plastics and toxic chemicals, then I'm contributing to cleaner waterways and fish in the sea and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is, how did we end up in these silos, thinking that we carried this burden just ourselves and that it is our fault that we're sick? In that we are born into a narrative, a system based on history, ancestral, but also what is happening right now. And somehow we think that if we just fix ourselves and work harder and do better and perfect, and if only I do this and when I get to this, I don't think that way. And I don't think people should be thinking that way. That if instead of us seeing it as an If we think it as a we when we start healing, then I think we make very different choices, not just for our families, and not just for our neighborhood or small community, but I think more globally as well. We've got to remember that we are part of an ecosystem. It's like our body systems don't work in silo. We can't
Exactly.
just work on our guts. Our nervous system and our guts connected. Our bowels are connected to the liver and vice versa. Like everything is connected, family wise, culturally, ecologically. We've got to remember that we're in relation to everything as well. It's so whenever I make choices for myself, and yes, it is such a privilege that I can do this and I get that. But I think of it as what I choose for me. Is it good for the collective? Is it good for all? I want to be that way. I want to be considered. And ultimately, I want everyone to be considered. It's not something I lead with. When a patient comes to see me and they're in a lot of pain and they suffer from migraines, of course, they're only thinking about the migraine. I've already started thinking about, but where is the migraine in the body? Where is the body in context of the home and in relationships to work and their partners? I'm already thinking, how's this manifesting? And we get there. But I do also want my patients to know this is what I'm thinking when I'm thinking about individual and collective healing.
That's really true. And it helps removing the guilt of certain people are always sick. And there are, as you said, factors that aren't just related to them or to something that they have control of. It could be their environment or the water that they drink and the people that they see every day. And if you look at nature, trees, they always work as a collective. If one tree isn't getting enough nutrient, the other trees are going to send more to that specific one because they understand that they're only going to be well as a collective. And as human beings, we've forgotten about that. That's a really good reminder. So thank you.
Thank you.
Um, I'd love if you could tell a story about someone that you've worked with, where you've you know been able to address those deeper barriers or the underlying causes of their symptoms.
I think just a patient, and again, if you ask me this at a different time, I might come up with a different patient, but without naming any names, a patient who presents with chronic infections and chronic anxiety. I did a comprehensive stool analysis just to get an understanding of their gut microbiome. And I found that they were really low in beneficial bacteria. And we know that that makes up 2/3 of their immunity. And I had to educate them on that 90% of serotonin is made in your gut. It does promote intestinal motility, but serotonin also makes us feel good. And it helps us with sleep and pain and memory, cognition and mood. And so the awareness and the education piece, and at the same time, creating some capacity by helping nourish their nervous system because they're in this fight, flight, anxious state. And they were getting sick with colds and flu. So, yes, I'm going to give them some vitamin C to decrease the frequency and severity of symptoms. And at the same time, work on building up their gut microbiome. They had a significant overgrowth of yeast in their system as well. But sometimes I think when there is such an undergrowth, obviously there's stress and maybe they've had lots of antibiotics, maybe they're eating lots of preservatives, foods that have that antibacterial effect. Maybe they're swimming in chlorinated pools, which is like dipping into antibacterial solution. So it's kind of, there's a whole bunch of pieces that we're holding together, but that awareness and that meeting and tending to those different pieces can create just some calm and balm and relief and what patients will call healing, like I feel better, or I'm not sick anymore, or I've got more energy now. And so with that particular patient, though I see so many of this particular type of patient, interestingly, it's such a pleasure and it's a joy when you can meet those parts of themselves that have been long forgotten or just they didn't realize was really important.
Okay. And for someone who's been dealing We're getting to the end of our conversation. I'd love if you have any recommendation for books or podcasts, if, anyone wants to kind of go a little bit deeper into some of the topics that you've mentioned. I know there is your own books, but also if you've got other recommendations.
Yes. Yes, I wrote a book called I Am Food, Eating Your Way to Health. And I wrote that a while ago just to help people understand that it's not about a particular diet, but about the source and processing, the quality of our food, where food comes from, the nutrition that is built in good sourcing and quality also means how food is prepared to either retain nutrition or to support good health. And I'm currently, yes, writing this other book on the different barriers and possibilities of healing. I source my information and material from so many different places, different research companies, different supplement companies. They put on different webinars and education and conventions and things like this that we're always updating and attending to. So there's what we learn as practitioners, but sure, out there are so many wonderful books um, and people that I like Chris Kresser, and I love his books and his belief and philosophy very much. I like Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon, of course. It's an old goodie. There are so many different herbal books that I love that are very traditional, like Simon Mills and Mrs. Greaves' herbal books. Pizzorno and Murray's Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine. I'm just looking at my bookshelf right now. There's
Yeah,
so
that's a
many.
good that's a good
That's
start.
a good start. I could really go on. That's a good start. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Anthia. It's been a real pleasure, having you, and I'm sure it will be very interesting and inspiring for a lot of people listening. So thank you again.
Well, thank you so much for having me. They were wonderful questions to talk through.